Um, oh yes. So speaking of like clothing and stuff, we'll be talking about like all that kind of stuff, like what to wear and stuff. Do we want to talk about how to potentially identify cops and other ne'er do wells? I saw Nancy had put in some notes, but this is something that like
These notes are
I've
awesome,
noticed
by
a
the
lot
way.
over here.
Fucking
Yeah,
great.
really, really thorough.
Fucking amazing.
Thank you. This is literally just me like going from topic to topic and
I
ranting.
love it.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to like publish this, but not, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's great. It's great
Has
information.
Has anyone else had any kind of like encounters or any kind of anecdotes about actually kind of encountering any kind of like undercover cops or anything like that? And
Well, I will say there was a case in the UK which was this is actually a counter. This is a warning about like overdoing this, because there was a guy who did something which he kind of shouldn't have done, but like basically like there was a banner at a protest against the bill we were talking about earlier, the PCSC bill, which said cops kill. And then at some point in the protest, it got torn down the middle and swapped around, and this guy was holding up the banner so it read kill cops. And loads of people were like, that guy's an undercover cop, fuck that guy, find out who
yeah.
that guy is, hunt that guy down, all over left
Ooh.
Twitter. And like
Was he
he
just a
wasn't an
dumbass?
undercover cop. He was just a
Yeah.
dumbass, and he's now being like fucking prosecuted. I think he's actually being like, I think he might be American or Canadian, and he's been like extradited so he can be tried and all this shit. And honestly, left
But
Twitter did a whole bunch to like draw attention to that guy and help identify
Yeah.
that guy. So
Kind
like,
of like
just a
was it the
warning there.
Boston
Like,
bomber with Reddit when they like went wild and they were like, it's definitely this, but it's all this stuff. It's like
Yeah. No,
it's not really helping anyone.
we
it's
did it, Reddit.
extremely dangerous to like to do that. Like it's been said before, but if people are like trying to identify someone over the internet and people are going like, oh, this is the guy, this is the guy, this is the guy, assume they're wrong at
Yeah.
first until
Yeah,
you
yeah.
see more evidence, because they can really like ruin someone's life
Yeah, yeah.
doing that.
Oh yeah.
You have to be very careful.
I'm blowing up these images really big in the notes so that Nicole can put them on screen. But
Yes.
yeah, do you want to tell us about Anansi? Do you want to tell? Or Tim, did you have more before going into that?
I
I
like
was
how
actually going to mention. Oh, sorry.
I know. I just really quick. I like how Anansi's like, yeah, don't do that. You're gonna like ruin someone's life, and it's so remarkable. Just to say, real quick, it's like an enormous distinction between actual like people that actually do the work, are actually out there doing
Oh,
like some
yeah.
real shit, and then people that don't, but then spend all of their time and energy trying to tear down
Yeah.
people for fun
Yeah.
as their job because they're being a leftist when they do so. I just want to make
Yeah.
a
Oh, yeah.
fucking note of how scummy those pieces of shit are, how cowardly, and how not part of the fucking revolution they are, in my opinion. They're fucking
Like
distracted.
people, I mean, this is part of what we're trying to counter here on Red Planet, isn't it? Like a lot of people are just sitting around and they have nothing to do, and then they engage in this kind of just like.
And they
down culture.
probably have good intentions, but they're just not prepared for the task. They're not prepared for the task they're trying to accomplish. Like
Right.
in like OSINT, like open source intelligence, like that kind of work is a lot more complicated than people like make it out to be. You're not
Oh,
just
yeah.
going through someone's Twitter and like making a single connection. Like you're diving pretty deep into a lot of information to sift through, especially if you're trying to find like a specific person out of like multiple people. It takes too long for a couple people on Twitter to figure out within an hour.
Yeah.
The-
Anansi,
the
you
thing
said.
I-
Oh, sorry. Fuck.
Oh, sorry. The thing I wanted to talk about though is that even though we're going to be talking about like kind of cops in like a protest environment, there's also a thing that has happened. It's happened a bunch of times over here. It's happened in the UK. It's happened in the States, where cops will infiltrate activist groups and stay embedded with them for a long time. And there's been cases. There was one over here that was really bad because the guy embedded himself with a bunch of climate groups for years. There was like a huge expose. There's like been a book written about it and stuff. And he was like literally like forming relationships with people. He was like sleeping with people, like all this kind of stuff. Like, and he was a cop like this. And this was like went on for like a couple of years or whatever. And there's been a few of them, but this main one I'm thinking of afterwards. they tried to I think it was a bunch of the women that he'd been in relationships over this time tried to actually sue the police, and he ended up getting paid out like something like $50,000 for the emotional trauma of
Yeah.
having to be embedded in these groups or whatever. And
Yeah.
and there's Mark Kennedy is the other famous one. There's been a bunch of them, and it's a lot of the times you get them like kind of agitating in weird ways.
Yeah.
So there was one dude who is still being unidentified, but everyone knows it's kind of like there's like a bunch of people trying to track down who he is over here, who was really active in a bunch of protests in the early 2000s. There was there was a lot of like youth focused kind of protests on this period, and it was about things like raising the minimum wage for kids and stuff like that. Well, like young adults. And there's a lot of kids like all that worked for fast food restaurants like McDonald's and stuff got together, and then just in general, like a lot of kids were leaving school to kind of take part in these protests. And this guy who was like one of the main organizers, who was like an older guy, would have been in his like 20s. Well, he was older to us, he was getting people to do things like he was like, oh, okay, cool. Like in the way that a teacher would engage with kids, he was like, okay, everyone get ready here. And then, when I say go, we're all going to run down, and we're going to run down to the end of the street, and we're all going to stop there and stuff. And everyone was like, okay, that's kind of weird, but we're all kind of kids. We were like 15, whatever. Like we just do whatever. And, everyone had their signs and stuff. And then, like on the news that night, it was just like the only footage was like of all these like kids running down the street with their signs and shit like that. And it's like, look, and then like years later when it all came out that this guy was like, like kind of this like undercover op dude or whatever, that had done heaps of other shady shit, again, like being in relationships with activist women and pretending he was someone he wasn't and all this kind of stuff. It was like, oh, that was that guy that was that was telling us to do things and telling, like getting us to do all these things. And it's like, this is so fucking like, it's wild, like, when all the dots connect. But so it's one of those things, it's like, you gotta kind of like, you gotta look at like a bigger picture, like if you are in, like if you're working with an org or something like that, and there's like someone that is like consistently doing weird shit. Another thing is, like constantly derailing things at meetings, all these things like that.
Where's that tweet about the FBI like guide on how to
it's like
whatever that was, everything on that list? Where is that? Anyone have that tweet?
Yeah.
I know one of you know what I'm talking about. Someone in the chat knows.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
But
please, sorry, go on.
Yeah, there's like a lot of stuff like that as well that goes on, where it's like where they're like, you think of like a like maybe like an undercover cop or whatever is going to be like at a protest being like, hey, you should throw a brick through that window or whatever like that. But usually it's like a lot more, like it's a lot trickier than that. Usually they're not going to be so obvious.
Like you mentioned,
anyway,
Mark Kennedy. I put the links there. Nicole's currently looking at the Wikipedia article for him. One of the things that he did when he was infiltrating these environmentalist groups, like he suggested that they go to a power plant and like cut the fences and get inside and all this stuff. And he basically outlined the entire plan to them. And then when they got there, a ton of cops were waiting. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then like the cops started beating the shit out of everybody. So classic.
Yeah, like one of the fastest ways to like, in my opinion, one of the fastest ways to spot someone you should at least be like careful around, if not a little suspicious of, is those people who like out of nowhere suggest really wild and dangerous stuff. Like you guys will be talking about like or doing some kind of like regular protest or demonstration, like making a banner or something, and then this random person will come out with, oh, why don't we insert insane action here?
Yeah.
Like just something like completely off the rails.
Yeah.
I was at a anarchist bookshop like last weekend, and I think I might have mentioned this actually already on. I think I might have mentioned this last week actually, but like they had a guide on like spotting undercover cops who were infiltrating your organization, and a few like pretty handy tips were like, and then these aren't just on their own to just be like that's definitely a cop or whatever, but like, and this isn't at a protest. This is like infiltrating your organization, but like, often cops will, disappear for a long time, for their job, and it is for their job. It's because they're, going out of cover to spend time with their family. They have no backstory. No one's ever met their family. Often they like have money and are really generous with it within the movement. Just like, hey, anybody who needs some, and like, often also like have access to a car. So like if there's someone who like has access to a car who's involved with your actions, like it better be someone who like has a bunch of pre-existing friends and you all know exactly who this guy is, because like if the person who drove you to the action and then a bunch of cops show up turned out to be a fucking cop himself, like that's an absolutely classic way that like that's why cops, undercover cops will be like leading in being generous with giving lift. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, we all fit in the van. That's really cool. Wait, it opens from the outside. Oh shit, where are we going?
One thing that's really shitty, and I don't know, Anansi, how much like exposure you have to like internet, like the not internet, but like the online left, but not just the online left, but like the work, like the asshole of it, which here welcome. Yeah, okay. So what's really concerning is that like people that are that maybe appear like follow these criteria a person that can fulfill the criteria of appearing to be an undercover cop can also just be a shitty sock dem who doesn't understand what the hell they're talking about. And so it's like I don't know how useful it is to like they've muddied the water so much with their garbage, and it's just I just want to make take a moment to tell everyone that they make everything fucking worse. Okay, they're just making everything fucking more difficult, because now it's like we are surrounded by people that are essentially appear to be undercover cops, and that makes it much more difficult to be able to like find these people. And generally speaking, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. I read. I don't remember. I think it was, but they were talking about like dealing with infiltrators within an organization, and someone asked a question like, what do you do if you think someone is an infiltrator? And the person responded, well, we'll have them peel potatoes. Like we'll make sure that they never have information. Like this is part of why like information security is so important. Making sure that like only people you absolutely trust have certain pieces of information. Even if you absolutely trust someone, even if you absolutely trust someone, do they need to know? Like keeping things on a need to know basis, and like only among people you trust is one thing that like really can help.
Yeah.
And someone mentioned in the chat as well, like the whole like cop jacketing thing, like
Fed jacketing.
Yeah, because like that is that is a tactic that like an actual Fed can get in there and sow distrust by kind of trying to convince people that someone else in the group might be
that's explicitly like the goal of COINTELPRO as a program was like to make people think that the FBI was everywhere, to make people think that the cops were everywhere, that they're behind everything. And it worked. It worked because it made people like so paranoid. We're accusing each other like, oh, you're a cop. No, you're a cop. No, you're a cop. No one in the room is even a cop. We're just all scared because we've been effectively trained to keep scared.
And then essentially, if there is a cop there, then the accusation becomes worthless. It's like
which is like that's how surveillance works. Is like you don't have to have it everywhere. You just have to make people think they're being watched all the time.
Absolutely,
we're going to go over this in a few weeks with Tia, who is like used to work in naval intelligence and has a whole bunch of super useful things to say about OPSEC and InfoSec. But in the context of at a protest, spotting an undercover cop.
Yeah, we should get back to
Anansi, can you tell us about at a protest what an undercover cop is like?
Yes. So I have a little bit of information on that. So cops will join the crowd and try to hide among people. Sometimes they'll do things like they'll hide behind be in the crowd, and they'll shove someone into the police line so the other cops can grab them and drag them back. Sometimes they'll mark out targets for people, or they'll just observe. Sometimes they'll like try to instigate people to do illegal actions. Obviously, one of the first things that like I do to spot someone as a cop is like look at their shoes, because their shoes will usually give them away. They're wearing like those typical kind of cop boots. Also, like if they're dumb, you'll be able to see their bulletproof vest under their shirt. There's a picture of that that like circulated widely not this year. God, time is weird. That circulated in 2020.
Right.
Of like a cop, like you can see his bulletproof vest under his shirt. You can see his handcuffs. And
That's
then like you
fucking
can see
wild.
he's wearing those like really coppy boots. There's like you can usually tell they're like these big, just cop looking white guys. They kind of share like a vibe and energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
like the one
Yeah,
thing
they
that
do.
like working in tattoo shops for years, I've become like a really
Yeah.
adept at spotting like the kind of tattoos that cops like. It's like it's
Oh.
different everywhere. Like American cops love certain kind of tattoos, New Zealand cops like other kinds, Australian cops like a different kind. So yeah, it's like fucking wild. And
Mhm.
a lot of them will have like straight up like cop tattoos, very visible or whatever.
Yeah.
But they'll try and get like, they'll be like, yeah, I'm an anarchist. I've got tattoos. I'm wearing a heavy metal T-shirt or whatever.
Yeah, these
But,
guys,
like,
they're
yeah.
also dumbasses. Like, so many cops are just, like, have no idea.
Oh, they're so
Yeah.
dumb.
Yeah,
They're,
they have
like,
no idea what an
yeah.
anarchist even is. They've just been,
Oh,
they're,
yeah.
they're,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they're like an
100%.
extension of propaganda. Like, what does propaganda
Which-
tell you an anarchist is? Like, a guy who's
Yeah,
wearing all
yeah.
black, who's just like, "Ah!" like,
I just
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to burn it
yeah.
all down, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
again
this
why
system
like
just sucks, man.
yeah, which is again why like sock dems just give off cop vibes because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But Anansi, what's the like you've got like a picture of guys with like a white band on their arm? Is that what I'm looking at here?
Oh
In the
yeah,
notes?
yeah. This is a thing.
Oh,
yeah.
is there a picture I can pull up?
Yeah, sometimes they mark their like
Yeah.
wear some kind of band or something that can like
So
identify
they can identify
each other.
each other.
It's really hard to like to be able to specifically spot out a cop unless you can like really see to their tattoos. Like you can see their bulletproof vests under their clothes and stuff. Like you can if you can tell they're wearing their gear. But it's one of those things where you just have to be careful and like be wary of someone if you suspect, because again, like Fed jacketing is a possible issue.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
like one
sure.
of the best things you can do if you can't like explicitly say, oh, this person's a cop, is just keep an eye on them and just like watch what they're doing, watch your distance from them and stuff. Like if you feel like you need to avoid them. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
Which
So
is
I
just
think you
keep
can
an eye
also
out.
like look at the way that they are engaging with the crowd as well.
Exactly.
Like, what are they doing? Are they looking at people? Are they kind of like giving them a once over to like like try like are they acting like the Terminator or what?
Yeah.
What's in his
Yeah,
what's in the guy's
if
back
you-
pocket,
if
by the
you-
way? Someone mentioned it looks like handcuffs in his back pocket as well.
Yeah,
Some
I
bulge.
mentioned he has handcuffs in his back pocket.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
could
yeah.
That's
kind of
what
see
that
the
circle is.
vest. You could kind of see
Yeah,
the
yeah,
vest
yeah.
through the
Oh,
shirt.
this is the guy
But yeah,
you were
if you-
mentioning.
if-
Okay, yeah. There, I can
Yeah.
see it now
Yeah.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah, no.
The
What are you
backwards
talking about? That's
the
just a
backwards
chill.
hat as well. Is
That's
always
just a
like
chill bro.
Also, he looks like a
That's just
douchebag.
chill, bro.
He
That's just
looked
a
like
college
Guys,
guy.
it's my lifesavers.
You
yeah.
just come to hang out, guys. What are you
As,
talking about?
as
It's
someone
just
who
a
used to
real-
be,
Just guys being dudes.
yeah, like
yeah, dudes rock.
as somebody that used to be like myself, I used to be like a chud. I used to hang out with cops. I dated a cop who is now a Fed. Like I have a lot of like
Disgusting.
experience like with this type of crowd. There's a certain like certain walk and certain like square off and a certain like
Mhm.
douchey like
absolutely, yeah.
like Gap, a guy who shops at the Gap but thinks he's like a badass. Like there's a certain like
Yeah.
they have a certain like they think they're super fucking awesome, and that is a
They all
vibe.
think they're Captain America.
Yes,
revisit?
yeah. And so this
Can I-
guy is clear. Look
can
how
I-
different he looks to everyone else too. I don't think it's like a perfect
Yeah,
world, but look
yeah,
at this guy. He
totally.
sticks out
Exactly.
so hard.
No, I mean, can I revisit the gray man for a second? Like all of these
Yeah.
clothing are the kind of thing that someone would think is just like just
A
blending
regular
in
dude.
because it's just normcore, right? So a lot of people mistakenly think gray man looks like this, but no, that's how you end up looking like a fucking
That's
cop.
how you
Yeah,
look like a cop.
Khaki
Like that.
shorts and
Exactly.
like a shirt
Yeah,
from the Gap. And
Yeah. Similar to
And also
like,
regulation haircuts as well.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, because you can't. Yeah,
Yep.
because the haircut, they can't just like
Yeah.
change that up on whenever
Yeah,
they
yeah.
want to. You're
and that's
right.
one of the differences between like cops who are infiltrating organizations versus cops who are just at a protest. Because with the case of Mark
Ah.
Kennedy, that dude grew out his hair, he had a big beard, and all
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
shit for the years
Got,
and
like,
years that he
ears
was in
pierced.
the right. But when you see the picture of him, like his real form, his cop form, like he's got the regulation haircut and all that shit. That's his kind of
Yeah.
how he actually prefers to be because he's a fucking cop. But this is like similar to some experience I have
Thumb
similar
squad.
to spotting cops at protests. Sometimes you should keep an eye on the media. We all know that like there is a rise of like democratized, as in like independent and low budget, like far right media now. People who are like very just kind of info wars or whatever. But obviously, like literally, InfoWars go up with the microphone that has a little box around that says InfoWars on it. Something that I've noticed a lot at trans rights protests, in particular, is people who are going up to interview people who, how to put it, like if you watch certain people who are going around with a camera or a microphone or both, and they're talking to people, like you can sometimes, if you just like tail them from a distance, you can sometimes spot somebody who is deliberately trying to pick on people who they think look cringe, basically, like who they are trying to single out to basically make like cringe content off of. And this is a thing where, like, if there are organizers who you can contact, and that's one of the things, by the way, we mentioned legal observers earlier. If you can find a legal observer, I'm talking UK stuff purely right now. I don't know about anywhere else, but like, if you can find a legal observer who'll be wearing like a neon jacket at a protest, they know how to contact the organizers really quickly, and then the organizers know how to contact any kind of security that the protest has. And so if you spot people who are like fash media, basically, and you can, like I'm saying, you can kind of tell sometimes if somebody's like going deliberately trying to look for like people to make fun of, or like make content out of.
This person has blue hair and pronouns.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. Then what you should do is like find a legal observer, get them to contact organizers, and see if something can be done about it. I've been in the experience, I've been the subject of like upskirting, and like my pictures were published by Andy Ngo after I spoke at the first trans rights protest outside Downing Street, and like the guy who did that was just there with like a couple of like fancy cameras, and he was just going around like and filming and taking pictures, and like people just assumed he was just legit media. Nobody checked who he was. Nobody asked for like ID or a press pass or anything. And I think like on some level, I think that's kind of a failing of the organizers there. But like he was ejected after my speech because people overheard him calling in for like his fascist buddies to come and like basically start shit, like come and fight people. And then they kicked him out. And that's why it's important to have security at protests. But like if people had been kind of checking anyone who's showing up with like media gear right at the start, that guy wouldn't have gotten anything at all. So that's another thing. There's like, alongside checking out cops, another helpful thing can be like being wary of media and kind of trying to figure out what their deal is. Counterpoint to that, a lot of the way media works in the modern age is Associated Press. And what Associated Press do is like they just get pictures of everything, and then they sell to whoever wants it. And so sometimes, and I have also had this, you'll tail guys around for a little bit, and you'll see them interviewing like young, nervous, often disabled trans people, or like trans pride or whatever, and you're like, you motherfuckers, like, you know what they're doing. And then they'll turn right around to the most attractive, confident, well-spoken trans person they can find, and they do an interview with them. And what they're actually doing, and I've looked into this, is like they're literally just covering their bases. They're like progressive media will want this interview, and the InfoWars dudes will want to buy this interview off me, so I'll just be able to sell both. For my money, kick that fucking guy out anyway. But like, just being aware of the media is something I kind of tip I'd give.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I said before, cameras are cops.
Yes, absolutely.
Cameras are cops. Just like treat it like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people advise
there's a way you have to. There's a way you can approach media people if you're not sure. Like, talk to them politely and ask questions and say like, okay, well, like, I don't want to be on camera. Like, this isn't something that should be recorded. Like, you can politely relay that information to them. And sometimes people don't, and it becomes like an issue when it doesn't have to. But there is a need for people to discern, like, when is this situation where this camera needs to be.
Yeah.
This is someone that's putting people in danger, and it very much can become a threat to people's like life and people's freedom.
To piggyback off of what you're saying, that cameras are cops. My experience with Andy Ngo is that I was at a BLM protest, streaming a lot of the speeches that were being given, and it was really fantastic. Like, I learned a lot. These are great speeches on like whiteness and all sorts of things that a fascist would find an opportunity. I think is really good to hear, but also a fascist can easily spin as some sort of like anti-white hate stuff. And so Andy Ngo took my stream and then tweeted out a clip, and that was, you use that to propagate some fascist agenda. Now, I don't know if the right answer is in that situation, but because I don't know if that means that we no longer broadcast this type of thing anywhere, like no faces were being exposed. People's faces were covered, but people were giving like speeches, and they were really great in my opinion. But also that fascists will take any opportunity to, you know, use that footage in whatever way, whether they're taking the footage or they're purchasing the footage, or they're co-opting, you know, taking someone else's like an anti-fascist footage and then being like, well, this is hilarious. I can get my fascist buddies to hate this. So again, I don't know what the solution is, but just sucks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one more quick tip is just like I've heard people say before, if you are kind of like a known person online, so like this is a tip, just if you basically are a little more identifiable than other people, another reason to be aware of the media is just that, like, if you can just position yourself behind the line of the media, like often people who are a little bit more recognizable will literally just travel with whatever media people there are, because then you can just be behind the camera. Like you can just make sure that you're not the one being photographed if you're on this side, because like, again, like if you're more recognizable, a photograph getting taken of you at a protest is a bigger deal, because it'll just be way faster for cops or whoever to, like, you know, link you up at being at a protest.
Someone was saying in the chat that someone saying in the chat that they're like, surely not Unicorn Riot being like, what do we think about that? Are we all
I have no opinion. I thought they were all right, but maybe I'm about to get schooled.
Yeah, I've seen like a lot of their stuff over the years. I don't know anything about who runs it or anything like that, but I think their claim is like basically being like their kind of independent, like lefty radical kind of news source, right? So I would I don't know, like, yeah, I don't have an opinion formed or whatever. I've seen some of their stuff that it looked really good, like, you know, but I just think in general, people that are like filming a lot of protests and stuff like that, it's mixed feelings about it, because sometimes you definitely want to have people there to see stuff, but then other times I'm kind of like, is it really necessary? You know, there's like a lot of people here with their faces and all this kind of stuff. It depends on what it is, really. Like, yeah, I think it's like, I mean, like, it's something that you got to have a lot of nuance with things like this, right? Like, yeah, like I think there's probably like, and yeah, no, actually, I've seen stuff that's done outside of filming protests that has been like really good practice and stuff. But yeah, still, if I saw anyone at an action or a protest with a camera, I wouldn't be that keen to be in front of it, you know?
Yeah, that's something I really regret is streaming any of that. I know better now.
And it's why, like, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
You go.
Yeah, and it's why like your personal, like your personal dress and everything you should be very careful and conscious of, because like you never know when a camera might be recording. So like maybe you want to kind of make it a priority to always be a little unrecognizable, to always be a little like, you know, have the ability to duck away if you need to.
Yeah.
Because you never know who's recording or when.
I just saw Jay Downs in the chat saying that Unicorn Riot hacked and obtained 400 gigabytes worth of intel from the white supremacist group Patriot Front, which is like that's very base. Like that's really
extremely
good,
base. Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah, they're doing good journalism, but just like if they are showing up to something, it is just a thing. Like it's just like the cameras a cops thing is just like the best way you can apply it, and it's just basically like they can be doing good journalism, but you wouldn't want them to show up to certain things, basically.
And also,
it's not always who's recording. It's just the fact that it's being recorded and it can be seen by the people. Like,
thank you.
It can be a journalist that you completely trust, but the cops are still going to be able to get to that footage because they're going to post it somewhere.
Yeah.
So even if this person is like trying to take steps to like not record protesters or like not record protesters' faces, or like do whatever they can to mitigate that, their footage is still itself a risk.
And
even if they have the best intentions.
Thank you for mentioning that, because maybe I should be more specific. When I said Unicorn Riot, I didn't mean the organization and every person in it and their feelings, their intentions. No. And I think we have to start like
filming protests.
We have to humble ourselves to remember that, like, maybe I could do better to communicate, but I also think that people tend to jump to this individualistic, like reputation based, like, I don't know, defense mechanism where if I say this person, you know, what do we think about what this person has done? They think, oh, this person's a good guy and he doesn't have any bad intentions. It's not about that. It's about like the almost like the physical property of what are you putting out into the world. Ukraine right can do an amazing job in a lot of ways, but I think it's still important that we should still be able to criticize tactics, even if they're tactics done by comrades with great intentions that do other great things.
And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.